The little town straggling up the hill was bright with colored Christmas lights, but George Pratt did not see them. He was leaning over the railing of the iron bridge, staring moodily at the black water. The current eddied and swirled like liquid glass, and occasionally a bit of ice, detached from the shore, would go gliding downstream and be swallowed up in the shadows. The water looked paralyzingly cold. George wondered how long a man could stay alive in it. The glassy blackness had a strange hypnotic effect on him. He leaned still farther over the railing. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a quiet voice beside him said. And so begins The Greatest Gift, the short story by Philip Van Doren Stern that became It's a Wonderful Life, directed by Frank Capra, starring Jimmy Stewart in the 1940s. Of course, a beloved film that everyone knows about, but an odd film, and one I wanted to talk about today because it really has a strange structure. When you really look at this scene, which starts the short story, The Greatest Gift, you see that in the movie, it's like an hour and 40 minutes. It's really an hour 38 minutes into the movie where this scene takes place. So the movie's gone on for well over an hour and a half before we even get to this sort of point in the story, which is the beginning of the short story. And this is George Bailey about to commit suicide. So in the story, George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, decided to end it all. He's in despair. They've lost a whack of money that's going to turn into scandal. And he's been stuck in this small town, and he's had big dreams of getting out and, living a bigger life than he has.
A new magazine. I never saw it before.
Of course you never. Only us explorers can get it. I've been nominated for membership in the National Geographic Society.
Is this the year you can't hear on? George Bailey, I'll love you till the day I die.
I'm going out exploring someday. You watch. And I'm going to have a couple of harems and maybe 3 or 4 wives. Wait and see.
And instead, he's been sort of stuck, caretaker of the building and loan in the small town. His father gets ill and dies, and he has to sort of take over the patriarchal duties, I suppose, of the family.
George, they voted Potter down. They want to keep it going.
You
did it, George. You did it. They got one condition. Only one condition.
What's that?
And that's the best part of it. They've appointed George here as executive secretary to take his father's place.
Well, no, but Uncle Billy is...
You can keep him on, that's all right. As secretary, you can hire anyone you like.
Now, Dr. Cameron, now let's get this thing straight. I'm leaving right now. I'm going to school. This is my last chance. Uncle Billy here, he's your man.
But, George, they'll vote with Potter otherwise.
All this contrasted with everyone else who's off, doing big adventures, having a grand old time in the big cities, and his brother's gone off to war to become a war hero. And he can't, of course, because in the beginning of the film we find out that he can't serve because he's got a bad ear. So everything seems to be conspiring against George as the world is sort of drawing down on him, and he's just in a state of despair, and he just pleads, "I'd like to just never have been born at all."
I suppose it'd been better if I'd never been born at all.
What'd you say?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
Oh, you mustn't say things like that. Wait a minute. That's an idea.
And this is sort of the beginnings of the short story. Clarence isn't Clarence in the short story, but he is an angel, and he grants him his wish, which is to see the world would have been like if he had never been born. And in the short story, he makes it very clear: you're a free man now. You don't have any connections to this anymore. And then he goes around and he sees, of course, all the world, all the impacts that he's had on this small town and the people in the town, and all the little things that he's done that have become big things for everyone around him. And that's sort of the idea of the story and why it's become such a wonderful holiday classic. And the story of how It's a Wonderful Life became sort of a Christmas classic was that it had gone into public domain. Copyright was not renewed on the film, so it eventually, the rights expired, and PBS was looking for something to put on at Christmas time, could always play it for free. No licensing fees or anything. And eventually, year after year, people seeing this film, it eventually became a classic. But a classic sort of despite itself in some ways. Like, it's a wonderful movie, but it does have like a super long beginning. It's very not a classical structure whatsoever. It's very episodic. So from the beginning of the film, it's all backstory, and it's like an hour and a half of backstory, which is normally killer in a movie. So we see George as a kid. You know, he saves his brother from the water. He works at the pharmacy. There's a young gal that he's friends with. Eventually becomes his wife, and there's a moment where he saves the pharmacist from accidentally killing his own client.
Don't hurt my story again! Don't hurt my story again!
Oh, George.
Oh, Mr. Gower, I would never tell anyone. I know your feeling. I would never tell so. Hope to die, I won't.
It's just all these little bits, to the dance, to his father dying, and everything going along for the first hour and a half. So the whole first half of the movie, or more than that, is all this backstory that really doesn't have like a clear direction, other than this is George Bailey. We meet these spirits at the beginning of the film, but they don't really mean a whole lot to us.
Looks like we'll have to send someone down. A lot of people asking for help for a man named George Bailey. George Bailey.
So it's a very unusual way to structure a film, and I think some ways that was why it wasn't received as well when it was first released. It is a lot of backstory, and there's a lot of time spent without like a narrative thrust. And the thrust of the narrative comes, of course, when Uncle Billy loses the money at the bank. And coming up to this point, I always call this a bit of a clunky classic, because there's a couple of like some of the worst edits I've ever seen in a classic movie. And one of the ones is when they take the phone call from Harry, who is George Bailey's brother.
It's okay, isn't it? For a hero? Harry!
You old 7 times the son of a gun. Congratulations.
So it's a very strange cut, to go between like a medium shot to a medium shot, and everyone's a little bit not settled, and it's not really cut on action, which you'll see here. Like when Uncle Billy's in the bank, they cut on action with the paper, and it just doesn't work at all.
Good morning, Mr. Potter. What's the news? Oh, well, Harry Bailey wins congressional medal. That wouldn't be one of the Bailey boys.
You have these sort of I don't know if they're like retakes or why they were forced into those sort of edits, but they do sort of jar me when I'm just watching it as just a standard regular filmmaker, going, geez, not normally what you'd see in a classic movie like this. Although the Maltese Falcon also has a very bad edit as well.
It's lens.
That one always bugs me. That and Sonny's hand not punching Carlo in The Godfather. One digital thing they can do. But despite a couple of those like little minor flaws in the filmmaking, it really is a terrific film, and it has an exuberance and a life to it that is. It's very earnest, which to some people might think, oh, it's a little bit too saccharine. I always wonder if if conservatives watch the film and think Mr. Potter's right, all these suckers and taking advantage of him and his money. But it's clearly got a very social view of how we should live and how finances should be. People should have a living wage and those sorts of things. Not be taken advantage of, and it's just it's just shameless in its exuberance. But having said that, it is very dark too. When he does break down and he goes to the river to kill himself, it is a dark moment, and it doesn't feel false. It feels like he is really desperate, and there's despair.
All right, fill in that little bare spot right there. Isn't it wonderful about Harry? You're famous, George. Bet I had 50 calls today about the parade, the banquet. Your mother's so excited.
World War II had ended, and people had seen a lot of bad things, and life was not, so cheery, wonderful. There did have a dark side, and maybe that dark side does come through in this film and others like it of the time, of films like Best Years of Our Lives or something like that have come after the war, having to deal with all the things that the people had to deal with back then. And I will say there's a little bit of a different Jimmy Stewart, like the Hitchcock Jimmy Stewart post World War II, and then the pre-World War II Jimmy Stewart. So whatever to be said about that is to be said. But It's Wonderful Life really stands on its own merit, and it really, once you get past sort of the weird feeling of the timing of it, the structure of the film, it works. You just find sometimes you might get a little antsy in the first hour and a half, going like, when's something going to happen? When is this story going to get moving? And that's sort of what you're waiting for in it. Now, just as an aside, the Stern, who had written the original story, he couldn't sell it. So all the writers out there who were like, say, well, no one's buying my stuff. Well, he couldn't sell this short story at all. His agent tried, and eventually he printed about as cards, Christmas cards to people. And one of the cards was bought for $50,000 in its day by the head of RKO, who wanted to make the movie and had screenplays written, and didn't find its mark until Frank Capra came on. And of course, the movie is what the movie is. Capra was a very fine filmmaker, and a lot of money was put into it. Like all the sets and everything, like that wasn't a town. That was all built, that little town that they're in, eventually becomes Pottersville. So it was quite a large movie. And it's nice to see that it stands the test of time. People still love it. And yeah, it does feel sometimes a bit sentimental and stuff. But again, with that darker edge on it, I think it works. As a side note, I did watch the colorized version of this film as well. And I have to say I liked it. I know it's sacrilegious to think about colorized black and white movies, because they were never intended to be shown in color. And they were shot for black and white. A photographer would tell you it's a different shooting for color than black and white. But there's something surreal and wonderful about watching the colorized version of it. Like the colors aren't real in the way that the color of this video is real. There is a surreal aspect to it still, but there's something that's also very immediate about it that I find very interesting.
How old are you?
And it's really neat seeing that, and you'll see on the internet people have been taking Lumiere films, documentary films, and colorizing them lately, and they're quite extraordinary to see. It brings a whole level of realism to a past that looks like it's encased in black and white, that is not connected to us today, where it's very much connected to us today. All these stories do resonate still. So there you go. It's a Wonderful Life. It is. Have a great day.
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.